This is the review for Batman Arkham Knight from me, Globku, from Magical Noob. I understand this review is coming a bit late, 2 weeks late after the game's release to be precise, and there are various reasons for that. One, I wanted to 100% the game, which I did, because you only get the proper ending once you do that. And I also wanted to see all the side quests and give you a more informed review. The second reason for this review being late is the fact that I played it on the PC, and you might have heard some reports about how broken the PC version was. And in my opinion, a lot of those comments were exaggerated, but with Warner Brothers removing the game from the store, I was kinda hoping they would fix it rather quickly so I could give you a proper review after all the bugs were gone. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, so I don't think I want to delay this review anymore, so without further ado, here's my complete review for Batman Arkham Knight. We're gonna cover several aspects of the game. Without going into spoilers, we're gonna cover my overall opinion about the story, followed by some gameplay mechanics in which we'll cover the combat system, the Predator scenarios, detective skills, and the Batmobile. We'll talk about activities that the game has you doing, then we'll talk about Gotham City, the open world that you play in, and finally we will address the performance issues on PC. So let's talk story. While I was playing Batman Arkham Knight, I had the feeling that I was playing one of the best, if not the best, Batman story I had ever experienced. I'm talking comics, movies, everything. By the end of the game, I changed my mind. I think there were some key points in the story that Rocksteady fumbled, so while I don't think it is the best Batman story ever told, I think it's still a very good one. And if you played Arkham City, trust me, you want to see how it all ends. I approve this game's story in general, even though a couple of things I didn't like. In the future, I'll make a video where we'll discuss the story while spoiling everything, so if you guys want to leave any comments story related, please save it for the next video. Let's keep this comment section spoiler free. There was one thing I didn't like about the story that I can tell you right now because it's not a spoiler, and that's the spotlight that the Batmobile has. We'll get into gameplay mechanics later in the video, but the Batmobile exists too much in the Arkham Knight story. It's almost treated as a main character, and often when Batman doesn't have access to the Batmobile because it just, I don't know, crossed a bridge that was closed, your objective just becomes to lower that bridge so you can bring the car to the other side. Batman felt useless without the vehicle at times, and I think it was something completely unnecessary. But Rocksteady really wanted us to use the Batmobile because it was its big new thing. In the end, I think it was way too much. Next, let's talk about gameplay. The game keeps the basic mechanics of combat and stealth, but adds several new enemies that make you approach these encounters differently. There's a medic that revives fallen enemies, it might be worth taking out first. Militia brutes that require the use of gadgets, something the game never done before. There's brutes with miniguns and stealth sections that require really loud takedowns, so they will attract a lot of attention. Remotely controlled drones, a device that thugs can use to detect your position when you're using detective vision. So all of these really cool and interesting additions to the enemy roster. And to deal with all these new threats, they've extended both your combat and Predator abilities. In combat, there are several new moves, like the triple cape stun into a juggle kick, picking up enemies from the ground into a beatdown, and for double damage. The beatdown does double damage when you pick them up from the ground. In stealth, there's the new fear takedown mechanic, which allows you to take out 3 enemies before they even realize what's happened. And there are several new gadgets, like the remote hacking device that activates traps all over the map. While on the subject of gadgets though, one of the changes that I'm not a fan of was restricting the gadgets to a radial menu. Previously, we could just press one button on the D-pad and change the gadget that way, but now we have to open this radial menu to select the gadget that we want. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you have to solve a puzzle that requires 2 or more gadgets, you're gonna be constantly pausing the game, looking for the desired gadget in the menu, you know? This kills the game's pace, and it's kind of infuriating since the method in the previous games worked really well. I don't know why they would ruin it. But anyway, back on topic, both Predator and combat have been improved. They didn't abandon the solid foundation that they had in the previous Arkham games, but they added enough to it that it feels fresh and much more complete. Some missions have you use your detective skills, particularly the main missions. They've taken a hint from Arkham Origins and introduced some of the scene reconstruction that we see on Origins. And there are several cases where you're also using the Bat computer to check for surveillance footage and discover what you need to progress on your case. There's also a series of side missions where you're required to scan a few bodies, which can now be done on 3 levels. You can scan the skin, the bones, and the muscles. All of this should be pretty familiar if you play the previous Batman games. What's probably not so familiar is the Batmobile. I think the integration with Batman's movements is quite brilliant. First of all, you summon the car by pressing one button, and it just comes rushing to your locations. If you're in mid-glide, the car will calculate where you'll land, and you'll just go straight into it. When you're done, you can simply eject into a glide, so it's a very well done integration. The Batmobile does get stuck sometimes when you summon it, but nothing game-breaking. The Batmobile has 2 modes, which you might have heard of, Pursuit and Battle Mode, but in general I'd say it has 4 uses. The first one is obvious, cruising the city. Driving... The Batmobile doesn't handle... It's not the best thing in the world. It's salvageable, it's okay, but the driving isn't the most pleasant experience. It's alright, I guess. The second use is pursuing enemy vehicles, trying to immobilize them. You can do this by shooting the immobilizer missiles, which can take a while to lock on, so it encourages you to stay close to the target until it locks on and you can fire the missile. But you can also ram your vehicle against your enemies, which is extremely satisfying. And you can dodge incoming attacks by strafing left and right. The only problem here is, again, driving not being stellar. And it's not too big of an issue, as I've said. It's okay. The third use of the Batmobile is fighting enemy drones. Enemy tanks, enemy flying mini helicopters, missile launchers, stuff like that. For this, the Batmobile transforms into battle mode, which kinda controls like a hover tank, and also unlocks the weapons on top of the vehicle. You can shoot the machine gun on specific weak points to destroy those tanks, or use the 60mm cannon, which is on a small cooldown, but you can just shoot whatever. You will do significant damage to every vehicle that you shoot with that thing. While fighting the tanks, you're sort of building up a combo that you can use to fire missile barrage that takes out multiple targets at the same time, and some other skills that you unlock further down the road. I'm not going to spoil those. These encounters were actually fun for a while, especially when new enemies were introduced, but it gets repetitive really, really fast. If Rocksteady intended on having us use the Batmobile this much, they needed a lot more variety in these encounters, because it gets really, really repetitive. The final use for the Batmobile is to solve puzzles, and this one is awful. Basically, when you're in battle mode, you can shoot a power winch. This can be used to pull objects, or to pull down walls, or to power up anything that needs energy. On top of that, the car can be remotely controlled, which means some of the puzzles will require you to switch between Batman and the Batmobile back and forth. I found this feature to be extremely dull. Something that slowed down the game's pace severely. Some puzzles were actually interesting and rewarding to figure out, but acting out these solutions felt extremely clunky. I am not a fan of the Batmobile puzzles at all. I think they are by far the worst thing in this game. Next, let's talk about activities. What do you do in this game? I think one of the best things that the Arkham games have is the number of different activities that the game throws at you. A single mission could have you fighting a group of thugs, followed by some puzzle solving into a stealth section, and there's often lots of surprises, and Arkham Knight does it even better. Arkham Knight changes the game in ways you're not expecting. A good example is the very first section of the game, where it starts as a first-person shooter. This is something very different from what you would expect from a Batman game, but it's also the perfect vehicle to convey what the story was attempting to tell us. Aside from the overuse of the Batmobile that I've mentioned before, I think it's a really solid experience, main mission-wise. And like Arkham City, you can stop doing the main mission whenever you want and go tackle any of the most wanted cases in Gotham City. Some of these are fun, some of these are super repetitive. There are mines scattered across the city which you must disarm, but to disarm them you gotta fight Arkham Knight's tanks. There are firefighters in danger, so to rescue these firefighters you have to fight a group of enemies, and they are really, really repetitive. There's lots of these, and you're always doing the same thing. But some other side missions are actually really cool. There's a monstrous man-bat that appears above the Gotham skyscrapers, and you gotta find out who he is and find out what happened. And I mean, there's a mystery there that is really cool. And speaking of mystery, there's a series of mysterious murders that have happened in the city, and once you use your detective skills to piece out who the murderer might be, it ends up in a very cool boss fight. So yeah, some missions are really cool, some are really repetitive, and that's the side missions. Speaking of boss fights though, I was curious to see what feedback Rocksteady would take from the previous games, because there were some good boss fights previously, and there were some boss fights that were not so much. So yeah, the way they took this feedback was just to pretty much scrap boss fights from the game. There are a few. There are not too many boss fights. Most of the quest lines end with the cinematic of Batman punching a villain in the face and taking him to prison. And so there's not exactly a boss fight there. But there are a few. And my main complaint about the few boss fights that exist is that most of them you fight inside the Batmobile. Another case of overusing the fucking car, basically. Yeah. Other than the main missions and side missions, you have the usual Riddler trophies, riddles, destructible objects, but this time you are actually required to get all of these if you want to watch the real ending to the game. Now, I've heard some people say they were satisfied with the ending before they got all of the collectibles, but I can tell you, it doesn't even compare to the real ending after you collect everything. And this actually doesn't bother me personally, because I'm of the opinion that the Arkham games do collectibles better than any other game, bar none. So I actually enjoyed getting my 100%, with the exception of a few Riddler puzzles, which had me switching between Batman and the Batmobile, and I hate that mechanic. But you just kind of power through it, I guess. Okay, time to talk about the open world. The game takes place in Gotham City, an environment about 5 times as big as Arkham City. The city itself is not too impressive in terms of size. We've all seen far larger worlds in gaming. I mean, Skyrim, Witcher, all of those are far bigger. But look at how tailored all these streets are. All these buildings are... like, there's a customization that makes the city stand on a level of its own. You can't look anything without seeing some clever billboard or a building with an Easter egg. They are everywhere, and this imagination of Gotham City was something that really impressed me. Although the city size isn't too big, there's a lot of verticality, a lot of tall buildings, and also an underground network. And also tons of buildings that you can straight up just get in, and all without a single loading screen, which is really impressive, at least on consoles, where performance isn't an issue. On the PC side of things, I've seen multiple reports of textures not loading properly, frame rates below 10 whenever the Batmobile is involved, basically a really big mess. This was not my personal experience, so what I'll be talking about regarding PC issues is purely from my experience. On my machine, the game is very much playable. At this point, Arkham Knight still runs better on my machine than The Witcher 3. Alright? According to an article on Kotaku, Warner Brothers knew about the problems this game had long before it released. They're retracting the game from Steam sort of felt like they were doing the right thing, and I think they're doing the right thing, but it doesn't excuse them from launching a game and charging $60 for this broken product. And this is coming from a guy who completed it without any game-breaking bugs. Just a few issues with performance here and there, very floaty frame rate, a few crashes, but my experience wasn't nearly as bad as some people report. But we need to stop taking this bullshit. We need to stop saying, it kinda runs, I guess it's okay. No, just stop giving these people money. That's pure and simple. I would tell you to go buy the game on console if it's a possibility for you, but I guess you don't even have a choice, because as of the making of this video, the game is still not back on the Steam store. But those were my thoughts on Batman Arkham Knight. In short, I think it's an amazing game, but the Batmobile kinda gets in the way of it. And on the PC side of things, I think I've had enough with games releasing on a semi-broken state. But that's my opinion. I'm sure lots of you have played Arkham Knight already. If so, let me know what you agree and what you disagree on. Let's get a healthy discussion going on the comments section, and if you got any questions, feel free to ask me. And as always, click the like button if this video was useful, or if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more gaming goodness. I've been Globku. Take care, everyone. See you next time.